Good morning.
Good morning.
We've already been chatting a little bit, so thanks for being here. I appreciate it. You are the faithful half or third of the people who decided to show up. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. You know what's interesting? My name's Joel. That's not interesting. We had to write a little paragraph about what this thing was about, and I've looked at it multiple times. It's like, what if you had easy access to good data and metrics so that you could take care of the people in your ministry and make informed ministry decisions and communication strategies easily? I'm like, what if? And then I was like, do I have to answer that? So I appreciate you showing up with an open-ended kind of question like that. We'll see if we can figure that out. So just really quickly here, my name's Joel. I'm the son of a missionary man. I was born in Brazil, spent some time in Panama, a little time in Dwight, Illinois. I grew up wanting to be, actually I didn't know what I wanted to be, and my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were in the Lutheran business, and I felt some amount of pressure that perhaps I should carry that on, and I wandered for a couple of years and then started seminary, and then I dropped out after 2 years, went into some music stuff in Nashville, and then moved down to Texas after I got a call from Bill Woolsey, and I helped start Crosspoint Community Church down there in Katy, Texas. You don't have to have heard about it. I then moved up to Salem Lutheran Church up in Tomball for about 8 years, and at those two places I started doing music and production. And it was interesting that the Lord took me from thinking about being a pastor to leaving it completely to go do music and production and road management and booking and keyboard playing, performing. And then He called me back into the church to do something in my area of interest. I was there for 8 years and moved up to Milwaukee. And what's interesting then, I realized that the older I get, the further north I'm going. Because when you start 80 miles south of the equator, and then you work your way up Central America, and then, I was there in Brookfield for 5 years, and then I moved up to Minnesota. And up there they say, going up north. And I'm like, I thought we were already there. And somewhere along the way, the creative side of me with music and everything, also, probably because of the logistics and the planning that it takes to plan worship services, I really started getting into spreadsheets and calendars. I was required to budget, for things, and so I got really complicated with my spreadsheets so I could run through different scenarios and defend my requests. If you set a goal and you want to baptize 50 people this year, and there's certificates and towels and cloths, it's going to cost $8 per person, and so I need $400. And you're over budget, and I'm like, okay, well, let's not baptize people then. And they're like, well, no, we need to baptize people. I'm like, you're right. So I need $400 to do that. Let's just plan on that sort of thing. So I've got really interested spreadsheets and calendars and planning, because that's what it takes. And then along the way, Planning Center Services came out, and it was just a great tool. And then little by little, that company started adding modules to it, and I just kind of got all in. I even have Planning Center socks. They know who I am, and they send me stuff. Actually, any Planning Center fans in the room? Yeah, I actually have two pairs of socks. Would you like a pair? They sent me some to give away. Anybody else? Yeah?
Jordan needs some.
I gave him some already. Anybody else? Planning Center socks? Yeah, man. Here you go. Thank you. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot more about it today. I wanted to talk more in principle about data, because there's different databases that people use, and I'm interested in helping people know how to do it. So in this session, I'll maybe start by apologizing a little bit. I'm somewhat ADD. Stream of consciousness. I'll try to stay kind of engaging and high energy with it, and if that drives you nuts, there's the door back there. That's okay. My hope is that you get something out of this. You may get more than you asked for, and you might not get what you were looking for at all. Being somewhat ADD, putting together slides was very complicated for me, because I put down a bunch of thoughts and things that I want to say, but this thing requires it to be somewhat linear. So I will do my best to kind of follow what I thought I might say, but I also want to be open to questions and things that you might have. in this session, I hope to help us maybe get a better grasp on understanding the data that you have, perhaps working on getting more of it, and then figuring out what you can do with queries or lists. And if you think I was offensive, then you don't know as much about databases as you might think. I'm going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to give you time to spit out some responses as well. I'm going to say this: this is best practices for ministry, and there are times when you might work at a place that doesn't necessarily have it nailed down like you think we could. And I happen to be at a place that doesn't do what I wish we were doing with this stuff. And apparently I can be somewhat badgering in meetings, and I've been asked to just not bring it up quite so much. And I just keep thinking to myself, how long are we going to apologize for the things that we're, the tools we're paying for? And, so my experience and the things I'm going to talk about is somewhat just in part conceptual. I have helped some churches make migrations, and I enjoy doing training. And one of my favorite things to do is watch light bulbs come on, and when people start going from information to imagination a little bit with what you can do with it. And when people's questions start going to, oh my gosh, that means we can do this. And I'm like, yes, now you understand it. And we go from data and knowledge to synthesis, where we apply what we learn. Okay, is that all right so far? Okay. Cool. Obviously, data is about data, but because we're in the people business, our data is about people. It's beyond demographics. A lot of that stuff is really obvious, gender, age, grade, things like that. But it's an important part of it. It's beyond where you live. It's also about what you're doing. And I think that data can show you if what you're doing is actually working or not. And then if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have to assess those things and, I believe, make adjustments along the way. Now, 86% of statistics are made up on the spot. Okay? And 2/3 of you knew that. And there's a bunch of you who didn't know that statistics are made up on the spot. Right? I did. You're catching on. I think people make up statistics in our meetings and in our churches. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. You heard that one before? Maybe. Maybe not. The modern service is the fastest growing service at our church. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. What data do you have to support these accusations or these assumptions? This is one of my favorite ones. The early service is paying for 90% of this budget. I need you to do this instead. And I've gotten to know my pastor well enough where I can say, we don't want your money. Okay, because if that's the way we're going to approach this sort of thing, if you're going to lead out a conversation with with that sort of thing, then we're like, we don't want your money. That's how we roll at my church, because a fact or a statement like that may or may not be true, and a person who's throwing that out as leverage in a meeting or in a hallway conversation may or may not actually have the data to back that up. And so people, I think, artificially add authority to statements when in fact they maybe shouldn't be doing that. Now I'm saying maybe a lot, and guys, a pro tip here, and my wife doesn't necessarily like this, so sidebar, a little public service announcement. A guy that I knew a long time ago would joke around all the time and say, hey, let's go to the movies tonight, let's say, and he's like, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. It's like, that was really good time today. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And he was just always doing this. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So my wife will say, hey, we should go do something tonight. And I'm like, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. So it does not work. It drives her nuts. Here's another one. Maybe you've heard this before. 60% of the people, and I'm making up the number, okay, but 60% of the people with young children don't give. Because life is expensive at that point, and so they're not giving. And so, has anybody ever heard anything that remotely resembles a statement like that? And if not anything like that, what statements?
Is somebody who is like obsessed with data and statistics like that, who sometimes does like remember like, oh, it's about this range or something like that? Like, is it still acceptable to do that, or should I just stop doing that altogether?
I think if we're gonna, my son does this sort of thing. I think if you're gonna state something, you better have something to back it up. Is what I'm. Yeah. And you don't necessarily have to cite it in a meeting, but I think it's irresponsible when we start using artificial information. It's disinformation. Oh, there, I opened a can of worms there, but that one. My son will make statements at times, and I'm like, buddy, where, like, on what basis are you making that claim? Sometimes we resort. Oh, I'm going to come back to this maybe a little later on. Sometimes we resort to hyperboles, and I think I don't know. That's not one of those graphs in math class. It's gross exaggerations, right? No one even attends that service. No one? Really? It might be 6, but it's not no one, right? There were 500 kids at VBS. Maybe there were, maybe there weren't. You know, it looked crowded, but how many kids were there actually, right? Other hyperboles. We never have any guests at this service. Or it might be the other extreme. There were only like 30 kids at VBS. Or we had over 100 baptisms this year. That was the biggest Christmas we ever had. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. If you have data to back it up, then you can make statements like that. But if you don't have data to back it up, then maybe you shouldn't be making statements like that. And certainly not making decisions unless you have data to back it up. It's still the same people attending the Saturday night service. That might be another one. We never get anyone from the community into our services. So others, your turn again. Hyperboles. You had your hand up again already?
I was just going to say, what's the best way you found to say, hey, this isn't helpful as a hyperbole without coming across like a jerk?
Come across like a jerk, because people who are just call it what it is. Or question it. Where are you getting that from, and help me understand why you're making that statement or that claim. But other hyperboles, have you ever heard any just wild, random over exaggerations in meetings? Just me?
Everybody hates the music. Everybody hates the changes we've made with the music.
Yeah. You know who says that? The one who doesn't like the changes we've made.
Else, they really don't want to own it. People.
Oh, gosh, I hate that one, right? Well, people are saying, well, give me names, because I want to talk to them. Yeah, I hate that one. Others? Really? No other hyperboles?
Early service than a late service.
I'm the king of hyperbole. I think I'm right every time I say it.
There you go. 97% of the time.
Ken, to your point, when I get called on it, you get called on it, go back and go, okay, what is my data? And realize I'm wrong. Oh, because then some level you've avoided the confrontation, but you've made your point.
Yeah. Yeah. Why should we keep track of stuff? I'm going to call on somebody new. Maybe for just a second. Anybody? Yeah.
Follow up.
Okay.
So yeah, just being able to look at the numbers and know how you need to care.
Okay. That's actually the first one I put up on my little list here. Care. What else? Yeah.
Make informed decisions to move forward or go backwards or go in a different direction.
Informed decisions to go forward or backwards. Do you have an example of one like that, maybe?
Just like you said, not having something like online services for the 10:30, but for the 8:30, yes. Do we have the data for that? No. So let's keep doing both.
Yeah. Others? Reporting. To actually maybe get rid of the hyperboles and have actual numbers. Help us be honest with ourselves. Yeah, man.
Tell truthful stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter what it is. Whatever story or narrative you're writing about celebrating as a concern is truthful.
I think for setting goals as well. Because, we've all heard the SMART goals. What is it?
Smart, measurable.
Yeah. Attainable, realistic. Yeah. I think in order to set a goal, it's helpful to know where you are. And then it's helpful, measurable, to know if you got there, right? Otherwise, you're living in a world where you're just guessing and going with hunches. And there's nothing wrong with trusting your gut. But it's also interesting to be able to show progress when progress has been made. It's tough, perhaps, to show failure when failure has been made. I have a phrase I say sometimes where we do stuff on purpose that's accidentally distracting. Like we decided to do something, and in doing so, we accidentally did something that was distracting to the thing we really wanted to do. What are you thinking?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So a goal might be 100 baptisms in 2022, or 50% of our members, not attendees. You got to track that, maybe not. 50% of our members in small groups might be a goal, or more people serving, or more first-time givers, or more attendees, or more kids. I saw a hand.
Yeah, I think for me, like maybe I'm not like a hyperbolist or whatever, like using hyperboles, but I'm like a super optimist. So I think a lot of times goals are important, or having the correct statistics are good, because a lot of times in my head, the optimistic side of me is like, oh, there's 300 kids at this, when in reality there's 225.
Yeah.
So my goal for the next one, I set it too high, and then when I don't meet the goal, I'm like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
In reality, if I had the data correct, the goal I would have set a more realistic goal.
Yeah. That's good for morale.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, no one wants to be wrong, I don't think. Nobody wants to fail. So if you set an unrealistic goal because you didn't have good data to begin with in the first place, then you spend the rest of your ministry career never achieving your goals. On the other hand, if you don't aim high, you won't reach it. It's so funny. My son, I'm going to pause. No, I won't pause. He's like, I think I'm going to get a B on this test. I'm like, way to go, buddy. Like, aim for an A, you know? But he's pretty realistic. Like, he knows what he knows about the subject, and he's decided he's not going to put any extra time into the thing, and he hits his goals. Maybe not as high as Dad wishes sometimes, but that's okay. That's okay. Where will you get your data? How do you get your data? What are you using to get your data? Anybody? What sort of planning center is? Okay, that's the tool. That's great.
Okay.
That's great. No, that's totally good. Dive down one notch from that, or maybe above it. Like what sorts of things are we measuring? I'm not sure if I have another slide. Yeah. Okay. Let me go back one. There's that linear thing getting up in my business now. We'll leave it there. Yeah.
Connection cards, just getting attendee data, names, email addresses, phone numbers, stuff like that.
Okay. Good. What other sorts of activities or behaviors or anybody?
All your various digital metrics from YouTube, Facebook, everything else, where you can get all those insights and go through that.
Okay. I think activities. The cool thing about data is it's binary. It's zeros and ones. It's you did or you didn't. You have or you haven't. You started or you stopped. Whatever the thing is. So it might be giving. It might be showing up to Sunday school. It might be participating in Bible classes. It might be men's retreats or whatever. But you did or you didn't. Or you have or you haven't. Or you used to and you don't anymore. And to think of your data in binary, black and white, because it is, I think is a fundamental place to begin if you're going to make decisions with that, if you're going to set goals with that. You got demographics, gender, ages. You can take a look at the future of your church right away. This looks hopeful to me. Anybody know why?
Lots of kids.
Right. So is this a healthy church?
Yeah.
I mean, people are sticking around, maybe not. But that looks like there's at least the possibility of a future. If your graph looked different than that, age way up here and the curve the other direction, it's weird. Most of the time we want stuff up and to the right. In this case, maybe having stuff down into the right. Am I saying that right? Yeah, you know what I'm saying. That's a good-looking curve.
I don't love the drop.
Well, like right in here.
Yeah, the 12 to 18. From 4 to 11. Like where the middle school, high school is going.
So what sort of things could you see from that? Maybe it's been a while since The weather was cold. Nobody celebrated New Year's last year, you know. What else could that be? Families are done having kids now, and there hasn't been incoming sort of stuff. So there's some you know, that might be a little more difficult to have a hard and fast observation about the thing, you know, or a decision to be made. But nevertheless, that's a data, you know, checkpoint here. Here's attendance. Sunday morning check-in at this particular church. Blue are regular attenders. Very few guests in orange that day, and no guests since then. Wonder why? Maybe we're not very outgoing. Or people show up and they tell their friends that they didn't like it and they don't come back, type thing, perhaps. Good volunteers. Looks like maybe the same size teams. You know, that's good. More volunteers for more people. Maybe fewer volunteers for fewer people. On purpose, accidentally. I don't know. Today's going to be a lame Sunday. We don't need as many people, so we won't schedule as many. Or, you know, or... yeah, it's not even Christmas. Maybe hard to tell, but average attendance for the weeks, 122.1. Poor kid. Sorry. Sunday morning check-ins up 29% from last week. That's great. If you sustain it, holy cow, that's amazing. Apparently there's no Sunday school at 8 o'clock, but most of the people came at 9:15. Maybe we don't want kids to come to the 8 o'clock service, apparently, at this church, because we don't do Sunday school then. You're perfectly designed to get the results you're getting. The reason you don't have kids at 8 o'clock is you don't offer anything. Well, only old people come to that one. Well, check that data too, right? Dive in, see what's going on. Love this one, look at that. Donations, $2 million at this place in 2017. All sorts of various funds, end-of-year giving, right? Easy to see. Holding steady across there. Here's another demographic view. Look at all these unassigned people. You know, there's 4,915 people in this list, but a bunch of them are unassigned. Member, visitor, participant. This is an Indian ministry at this place, Chalo. I wonder why they're unassigned. What does that mean? They're not a member or a visitor or a participant?
It could be.
Yeah, go man.
This problem of people that are like these weird permanent visitors that don't want to take the member class and you don't even know what to call them, but they show up regularly.
Participant, perhaps then, right?
Yeah, or when it comes to Planning Center, something we've discovered is people can't spell their name the same 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And we got 300 people that are duplicates that we can't even tell unless we really dig.
Yeah. I love saying stuff twice. I love saying stuff twice to make a point. So in that case, whatever you choose to maintain, you've chosen to maintain. So if you're going to have a database and you are going to check people's spelling of their names, just remember you decided to have a database with people spelling their names or misspelling their names sometimes. And maybe someone just needs to check for duplicates every now and then, right? Because if you don't, you let your own stuff get sloppy. And you know what happens then with sloppy data is people stop using it. Because it's not accurate anymore.
Sometimes
make it accurate. Or
read their writing.
It could be that, yeah. Here's just more data. In this particular year, probably when this church implemented this system, there were 964 new donors. That's probably just because it was the first time they had used the thing. Only 40 of them were recurring donors, which means the other 924 may or may not give. Only 7 people are using text to give at this particular place. And you know that because you've got data. Now, what you decide to do with this stuff is where my title, Daily Decisions, Data-Driven Daily Decisions for Ministry. Somebody say that 10 times fast. I could not say. I'm surprised I said that. Look at that. A lot of check givers, some cash givers, a few credit card and ACH givers. How many guys, women in here carry cash on a regular basis? A couple of you. My wife would not let me leave the house without some this time, but I never do. Hardly ever carry cash. So let's say I'm visiting your church for the very first time. Did I put that graph in here? Sorry, I'm going to fly through something here. Nope. All right. I'm giving away my punchlines here. You know, the quadrant type thing, right? Where you can categorize things. If you think in terms of digital giving and analog giving, planned giving and spontaneous giving, and you put that on a grid, if on Saturday nights you pray about what the Lord has given you and you decide to give back to Him a portion of what He's given to you and you write a check, that would be planned analog giving, right? If you've decided that, gosh, the Lord continues to be faithful, and I don't want to pray about it on Saturday night, I'm just going to make this an automatic thing, which is great, okay? Now it's planned digital giving. Every month, on the 2nd of the month, I want to give this back to God, and I'll review it at some point, again, some other time. Or maybe I won't, because it just becomes an invisible thing that happens in the background, and nobody ever challenges me to do anything different with it again, right? You might have gotten raises for the last 4 years, and nobody ever talked to you about, hey, reconsider what God might be doing. Then there is the spontaneous analog giving, you know, and it's like, man, that was a great sermon. And you tip your pastor. I love that song. And you tip the band or the organist or whatever. That's spontaneous analog giving. And then for a guy like me who doesn't carry cash, even if I loved your message, if I don't have a platform for spontaneous digital giving, I'm not going to say that you're missing out on 25%, let's say, of that quadrant of your giving, but you might. And so by increasing the number of text givers, you help a guy like me. I'm maybe not faithful in my giving, right? And so what do you do with information like this? And this is where that data-driven daily decisions for ministry kind of comes up. If you've got facts like this, and these are facts, I mean, what's something you could do with information like that? What sorts of messaging or speaking, what would you do with anything like this? Yeah?
We ended up, older congregation, people said, we don't want to ever do online spontaneous giving. No, it's not going to work. Our largest amounts come through that, and that was prior to COVID.
Okay.
So you can justify now that, yes, it is worth the extra expense and effort. And
no, gosh. Here's a phrase, cost of doing business. You decided to build a building and turn the lights on, and no one complains about, I mean, you might complain about the electric bill, but remember, somebody decided to build a building and put power in that thing and a switch on the wall, right? It's binary. Like you use it or you don't. And when you do, it costs money, and when you don't, it doesn't cost money. Cost of doing business. We have costs of doing business, and if we give people platforms to participate in ways that cost us a little something, consider the cost of what it would be if you didn't do that, and make it binary. Okay? And that's not manipulative, it's just the way it is. And we rarely speak with that sort of flip, flop, yes, no, black, white, because we like to fudge it all a little bit for whatever reason, right? Cost of doing business. So yes, it's 3.9% if it's American Express, and maybe 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. But I don't carry cash, and I couldn't tip the band this week, so you missed out on all of it. What else could we do with this, you guys? Do we want to move people from spontaneous digital giving to planned digital giving? Are there some benefits to that? So talk to people where they're at, I guess, is going to be one of these data-driven daily decisions for ministry. And if you know where people are at, then you speak to them where they're at. I think when Jesus told parables about the sheep, he might have been talking to shepherds, perhaps, because that was the best way to speak to them, you know. And then, did he say there's a woman who lost a coin to a bunch of men at the men's retreat? Or might there have been ladies in the room? He's talking to the people in the place. So speak to people where they're at. What else can you do with this, you guys? I'm going to just badger in, double click on this stuff a little bit.
You can thank your donors.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You can also use it to watch for recurring donors that drop off, because that's a pretty good sign someone's about to leave your church.
Yep. Okay. So that would be you have or you haven't, you did or you didn't. It's hard to do you will or you won't, projections. I mean, you kind of can, perhaps, but you started or you stopped. And then you can gauge when's the last time you did something. And for different people, you might, so Barna polls, what is it? We go to church now every 4 to 6 weeks, right? I mean, maybe we do, maybe we don't. You could probably look at that with a graph, maybe. Although we're trading places, so the number might look the same, but I wasn't there until 3 weeks ago. But if the last time you gave an offering is beyond 42 days, it's been 6 weeks since you've given something, maybe check in. What is it, like, kind of the standards, you lost your job, maybe there's been some tragic medical, thing in your family, and you just feel like you need to withhold, which is human, you guys. I mean, I've done it. Life circumstances come up and I feel like I've got to shortchange a little bit. I'll say it. I've done it. Nobody checked in on me. But.
Can't you take that data and say, now we can set our goals? Where we
Absolutely.
Want next?
Yeah. We
have data to set a goal.
Yeah, we definitely talked about that. You're absolutely right. I had this chart up already. Other things is like, what are people giving to? And your systems may look different than this. These are screenshots from Planning Center. I happen to be a fan, in case that wasn't clear already. But 721 people used ACH deposit, and we tagged it that way so that we could look at this sort of thing in yet another way. 9 stock gifts. Holy cow. Man, I know, right? Think of what they didn't give. That's what always blows my mind. You see someone with a fancy car boat, and I'm like, man, what in the world do they do? And maybe they're crazy in debt, but whatever. IRA distributions, ACH, land purchase, Mary Desson's not sure who that is, loose cash. 187 people did spontaneous analog tipping, giving. 142 people still using envelopes, things like that. And it's great when you can see it all.
Just to clarify, though,
yes.
Tipping is only when there's a jar in front of them.
Yeah. Or on the piano for the worship leaders. If you use Planning Center, the service planning thing is a great way to measure. If you use it only to map out what you're going to do in the service, you're missing out on tracking and planning volunteer engagement. Okay. Resources, these are old graphics because I didn't find one that works quite this way, but calendaring is great. And in this particular app, they've built it out where stuff kind of feeds in. Check-ins is a way, and maybe other systems have this, and maybe you're doing this, and maybe you're not. Okay, I don't know. I don't mean to keep saying maybe, but check-ins, that concept is a way to track activity. When you show up for Sunday school, you might see a room full of kids, but you don't know who was there, but you counted and it was 7, or 46 or whatever, and that was amazing. But to know who's there and how often they're there can be really telling, right? Checking in, and it's not just Sunday school. I'm going to suggest to you, no matter what system you're using, the more data you track, say it with me, the more data you track, right? So create opportunities to track data. And if you wonder why you don't have any data, it's because you chose not to track any. And so if you want to track more, then track more, right? Well, we don't use check-ins to check in men's Bible study. Why not? Do you want to know when your men are showing up? They're the leaders of the household. Whatever. There's a drop-off. Or why should I check in for the fall cleanup? Why not? Flip-flop binary, you know what I mean? Like, so that's a check-in thing. Giving, giving platform, registrations, signing up for events. So another data point might be, if you used to attend men's ministry events and then you stopped signing up for men's ministry events, then how do you speak to someone like that? Differently than someone who shows up. As a worship director, the phrase, you've heard this probably, preaching to the choir. you need to show up in church. And it's like, here I am. Right? So speak differently to the people based on their activity. And if you don't track their activity, you can't speak differently to people either. I'll suggest. Small group. In this particular app, you can track attendance. In this particular app, you can actually chat within your small groups. With this particular app, you can actually chat within your small groups while you're watching your online stream, or you can chat with everybody who's watching.
Does Planning Center interface with like 360?
I don't know what that is.
360 is a CPH.
The Missouri
software program for...
No, I mean, unless you're some crazy fancy API developer person. Yeah. That's good.
You manually put it in?
Yeah. I mean, we signed in.
I showed you that one. Okay. I'm going to say, just kind of summarize where we've been so far. It's not just how many people, but who is doing the stuff. It's the first time somebody gave someone and maybe the last time that they gave somebody. So you celebrate first-timers. You pursue people who haven't. Their last time they've done something. It's binary. And if you don't think of your data that way, then maybe you should. I believe the Great Commission, what Jesus was, I don't want to say actually saying, but I feel like I maybe could have been a salesperson, maybe not, I don't know. But always be closing. Have you ever heard that? The ABC, always be closing. Always be closing the deal, not closing your church, always be closing the deal. Go ye therefore and always be closing. Find people and continue to bring them in. Close the deals, engage them. That's what I mean by that. Another thing that data, I believe, is good for is for evaluating. Is it working or is it not working? We talked about that a little bit before. I'm going to give an example here, and it's maybe an example that you can only do if you're new to a place and you're not emotionally attached. There's an interesting thing about data. It allows you actually to remove yourself emotionally, if you're going to be honest about it, and just look at the facts, at the numbers. So I showed up at a church back in Milwaukee in 2013, and one of my first meetings, and I should have asked this question before I got there, but it was the worship schedule. And we had two venues at this church, modern and traditional. And it was 9 and 10:30 at both, so there's 4 services. Then there was a Sunday night traditional, a Monday night traditional in case you work on the weekends. So it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 services. The modern venue held 500 people. That's 1,000-person capacity, 2 Sunday morning services. The traditional venue held 200 people. That's 400-person capacity. Sunday night, another 200, 600 capacity in that venue. Monday night, did I say Monday already? Sunday. Anyway, 200, 400, 600, 800-person capacity, 1,000-person capacity in this. We had the capacity to have 1,800 people in church. Fact. Now you look at your attendance, and it was 600. And so I'm new, and I'm like, I happen to know that the president of our board was the CFO of a movie theater and hotel company in Milwaukee, and I was like, he would lose his job for 30%. No Child Left Behind is left behind at 30%. It's like, you know what I mean? Like when you get a 30% at school, that is not passing, any way you slice it, right? And so I'm looking at the data, and I don't know anybody, and so I could say, I don't care. And I was like, why are we doing 6 services? Because when you start dividing a room that many times, then you lose that critical mass sort of thing, right? Good thing I'm not doing this session twice. There were supposed to be 49 of you. There's about 25. I got a 50%. I maybe shouldn't be passing this class, right? It's just facts. We ended up canceling the Sunday night, and we ended up canceling the Monday night, and offered people other ways to get that. And in doing so, we had more energy to get maybe more creative with the services we were doing, and the place suddenly felt a little fuller because I maybe wanted to sleep in on Sunday, and that was the only reason I came Sunday night. Well, now you take away the option, and you're like, so you will or you won't. And some did, and some didn't. That's an example of data-driven decisions. Now, I'm not saying that's easy to do, but it's fact, and you can choose then to ignore it if you want. But then just remember, you've chosen to ignore it. Right? I'll try not to keep saying stuff twice.
What you like?
I know, I do.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so digital ministry gets weird when it comes to this stuff.
Okay.
Sometimes. So I'm in a context where we created some ministries, some digital ones during COVID.
Yep.
That we're at a point now where it's like, okay, things are kind of reopening more, and we never decided from the get-go what success looks like for this ministry. So it's like trying to figure out how you kind of tax it, what you do it. Like, I know a lot of churches start off with podcasts, for example. Like, oh, we're going to have a podcast this way. So think of it sort of like that. It's like, how do you work with the team to decide or to look at the data and say, wow, this is the threshold?
So defining success, is it numbers? Is it engagement? Same sort of thing, I guess. Necessity. The COVID thing is a really interesting curveball, has been for all of us. We had to punt very, very quickly for quite some time, depending on what city or state you live in. And we kind of had no choice. That would have been binary. Either we do or we don't. And if we don't, we'll see how this goes. And now we're at a place where maybe we should or maybe we shouldn't. And so it's defining the amount of numbers and maybe the amount of energy or the amount of money that it takes, and is it returning the fruit that you want. Now I can't tell you what that is. I can tell you at my church, we record music on Tuesday nights twice a month, pre-film it, and then we film sermons and weekly content on Thursday afternoons. We compile it together on Thursday nights, and we play it Saturday night because we don't want to reopen the Saturday night service because you only get 3 months of summer in Minnesota, and nobody wants to wake up, or leave the lake at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and wake up Saturday morning thinking about it. It's a decision we made, and so we're willing to keep on doing the Tuesday night and Thursday afternoon thing, just in part, we don't have to do the Saturday night thing anymore, okay? And then on Sunday morning, we replay it again, and now we're in person at 3 campuses, and the times are actually different. We kept our old schedule, 8, 9:30, and 11 for the digital platform, but in person, we don't need 3 capacities right now. Remember my previous story, because we don't need that many repetitions to accommodate the people that show up. So that schedule is 9 and 10:30. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 worship capacities at one campus, and so you look at the data, and it might be too much. I think it's one thing to be able to hit a home run one time, but to be able to hit a home run multiple times, like that's like when you're really good. I like to say another phrase: quality, sustainable results. And you have to set up processes to do something more than once, over and over again. We think we've landed on a process to handle that, and so far we've decided to keep continuing it. I don't know if that answers your question at all. I'm sorry.
So we have 4 services on a weekend, and they're all different types of services. In that case, you wouldn't want to get rid of one because they're different for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Have them.
Yep.
Different people are in different stages of life.
Yep.
And they think differently. So we have like Saturday service that we call Mercy 519, which is a very open and willing to allow less formality,
Mm-hmm.
Then we have contemporary, we have a traditional, and a contemporary that's for families, and the kids are involved with it. And then we have a contemporary that's more rocky. So it's hard to then take one service away if it's not well attended.
But here's the thing: at your church, you have decided on purpose to reach through variety instead of through focus and repetition, perhaps. And then you have to decide: is it working or is it not working? Your capacity, the capacity at your venue might be 500 people per repetition. You've got 4 different services. You apparently have the manpower to do that and do that well.
Right.
To operate at 12% capacity on a Saturday night with great music and preaching, and everybody's happy about it.
But it's hard also during COVID to say, okay, I'm going to get rid of a service because people aren't attending, but they may attend when they feel comfortable again.
If I said this was easy, then that is not at all what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's easy, but remember, if you have data and you choose to ignore it, you chose to ignore it. But then don't complain about it either, sort of thing, I guess, is one of these things. It just becomes really binary. We know that it's an empty room on a Saturday night, and we know that most of us hate it when we're scheduled to come in on Saturday night, but this is what we feel called to do. Great. It's binary. Okay?
Well, don't you have to frame it in terms of there's data.
Yeah.
There's ultimately there's accomplishing the mission or not, right, of which the data tells the results. Right? So if you have intended to engage preschool families with a family service, take whatever, right? Your data is going to tell you, or at least some of the metrics should be able to tell you that, right? The larger thing over the top of this has to be, what is the sake of our mission for our organization where we are, right? Am I wrong in assuming that? See, that seems to be what you're driving.
Hard to see data being a driver for ministry, because ministry is to reach people. And that's our ultimate goal. We're inviting people to know Jesus. That's our mission. And the data can't get in the way of that.
No, but it can tell you whether or not you're actually doing it.
Yes.
Being effective at college.
Right.
So our generation service has led into an increase in our Sunday school now. Because we bring our academy kids in to sing every week, a different class, which means our Sunday school has really grown.
It's great. I'm amazed at the number of churches the kids singing apparently is a silver bullet for growth. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not slamming that at all, but I can't even tell you the number of preschool teachers that's the only strategy for engagement in a congregation. I'm like, come on, think outside the box. I mean, maybe there's other options. Maybe there's not, but there might be. But if you only do the thing, then look back and say, how many preschool families have joined us because they sang on the first Sunday of the month during 6 months out of the year? None. Okay, then choose to do it just because it's cute, but it's not a growth strategy. I think it's cute. We do it at our church. It's cute. People are taking pictures, they're watching videos. This may sound totally crass. I don't think it's very worshipful. It gives me hope for the future of our church. If I had little kids, I'd be filming it. I don't have little kids, I don't film it.
Look at all those grandparents that show up.
Right. And then they go back to their home church the next weekend. So it's not a growth strategy. I'm just saying be honest about this stuff, okay? Cute is great. It's not a growth strategy, necessarily, but it might be.
At our academy, our mission field, because 60% of our preschool parents are not churched. And we are seeing a growth from it.
Not churched at your place or not churched?
Not churched at all.
Okay, because they've told you so.
Yes.
And you measure that, okay.
Our preschool knows that from talking to them.
Yeah. All right, another thing, and then I'm going to keep moving on.
I was kind of playing with the idea a little bit of how, in their situation, how they could use the data to, assume what, or, solidify what you assume kind of thing. So could you take, the Saturday night, or whatever, I don't know what it is, the family service, and look at the amount of, young families that are coming, and then look at all your other services and the amount of young families that are just coming to normal services, and then the correlation. I don't know how that works.
Yeah. You're not going to get data like that unless you put mechanisms in place to do it and create a culture then to do what you're asking to do. Because the connection card or the friendship book, having it there doesn't mean people fill it out, right? But if you want people to fill it out, then you need to make that a big deal and maybe explain why. If you have an app and you drive up to your parking lot and it knows that you're in your parking lot and it says, do you want to check in to Sunday school? And you hit yes, and then you walk in and your label is printed. Now you made it easy for me to do what it is you want me to do. And then you encourage people and you thank them for that. So I believe, I'm going to give you some questions. I don't know that I have those up here.
How do you get everybody to log in, check in for church? Because you only get the data, you have to have them check in, right?
Yeah. So
how do you get everybody to check in?
Well, you probably never will. Okay? But if you're only tracking, so I'm going to follow that for just a second. If you choose to measure one thing, then you've chosen to measure one thing. Okay? So if you're only going to track giving, then you're only tracking giving. But if you track giving and Sunday school check-in, now you've got 2 data points, and you may get this from this family and this from this family, but now you've got something from somebody. Okay, I'm saying stuff a lot again, but if we can start wrapping our head around about how black and white some of this stuff is, so you've got giving, you've got check-in for Sunday school, you've got registration for retreat, You've got serving on a volunteer team, and now you have some data from more people. You might not have all of it on everybody, so you have to create queries or lists or queues, whatever the language is in your particular app, and you search for those, or your software, and you search for things like that. So I'm going to look for people who gave in the last 7 days for the first time, and I'm going to do what? Thank them. And if you haven't given in 42 days and you haven't served in 42 days because you established strategically that 6 weeks, according to Barna, is when people show up, and if when they show up they're not giving, they're not checking in, they're not serving, then you maybe invite them. Right? Those who do, you thank them. Maybe you send them a follow-up on some resource you promised in the sermon. And you might say something like, hey, here's that book I talked about. Thanks for being here this past week. And you know that they're there because they either gave or they checked in or they served. And it might not be everybody, but it's somebody. And you speak to them differently. Okay? You're not going to create, most likely you're probably not going to create a culture where everybody does everything. But most people might do something. And so you work with that, and you create filters, queries, lists that take into account all the different possibilities that you, in fact, have created. And if you don't create any, then you won't have any data to draw from. And so part of this, like, again, you're perfectly designed to get the results you're getting. And if you're not getting the results you want, then design something different. And it's like, well, how do we do that? I mean, we'll start thinking about it. But if you don't even ask the question, gosh, y'all, so in worship ministries for us, here's an example where it's like, well, what did we do last year? It's like, well, we can look at what we did last year for Christmas. But we should ask, the next question should be, do we want to do the same thing? Rather than assume you're going to. And I just believe there's a lot of power in the question of what are we going to do this time when it comes to stuff like that. So, my springboard thing here, I'm a big fan of springboards. I'm not a diver, I do cannonballs, okay? Because I don't make very big splashes and it hurts my back when I land. But I love springboards. The springboard might be a question, what should we do this year? And it's a jumping point. A springboard might be, is it working? I believe springboards are most often questions that force you to answer. And then you have to choose whether or not you're going to do something about it. This may not be very helpful to you guys at all. If it's not, I'm sorry. In worship ministries, I like to ask questions evaluating what we did. And the questions, I have 4 questions I go to all the time. And it's what's right, and you've heard this before probably, what's wrong, what's missing, and what's confusing. And here's, I think, where we maybe fall short at times. And it might be lack of energy, or you're light on staff, or people aren't engaging, or whatever. But if you ask a question and you don't come up with an action based on your answer, I think that's usually where we fall short. So if you're going to ask the question, what's right, and you give a list, the band was amazing, or the sermon was great, what should you do with that? Do it more. Like, do it again. So you amplify what's right, or you do more of what's right. So then you ask the question, well, what was wrong? Well, it was hot in the sanctuary. Cool it down. Fix it. So if it's wrong, you fix it. If it's right, you do it again. If it's wrong, you fix it. If something was confusing, the communion traffic flow at my church, good Lord, the first time I walked in there, it was a mess. What was confusing? And so the very next meeting, I was like, you know what's confusing? Is the traffic flow for communion. So what do you do with confusion? Which is not of the Lord, which is interesting for communion, but anyway. No, you clarify. So you fix you do more of what's right, you fix what's wrong, you clarify what's confusing, and you add what's missing. Or not. But you don't have to do anything with all of that. But if you don't ask the question, you'll never do anything with it. I think it's good for us to take honest looks at the things that we are doing, okay? Evaluating I believe needs an action, a follow-up action of some sort. Okay. What do I have next? Fact-based decisions. What's the other type? Maybe feeling-based decisions? Yeah. Traditions, habits, felt need kind of stuff. I'm not saying you can only do fact-based decisions, but I think you better include some of those. I'm trying to think. I'll bet Jesus made some fact-based decisions. You walk into the temple and people are doing stuff they shouldn't be doing.
You know that.
It's wrong. Fix it. I don't know.
Myth-based decisions.
Yeah, I think you missed the beginning, but
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, but that's totally okay. It's the myth-based. Tell me more about that, just from your perspective, still.
It's kind of like, if we build it, they'll come.
It's like the data for COVID. Sorry. Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
They make it up.
Okay, you missed the pre-game show. And I was like, I'm going to back. Yeah, no, that's totally okay. We backed away from that. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I mentioned the attendance and capacity as a percentage score. I mentioned the Sunday night budget. You have more than you spend or you don't. What's growing, what's not growing? Fact-based decision. Answer the question honestly. Is it growing? If it's up and to the right, which is great, not just for our portfolios, but also for our ministries. Or if it's not growing, like you hate that with your stocks, why would you love it for your church, right? Do something with it. I'm not going to give you the answers to these questions. I want to encourage you to ask them and then decide to do something and then evaluate whether or not what you did is achieving the results you were hoping to. Is this at all helpful? Have you ever looked at your data this black and white before? And if you don't have the tools to do it, then that's a different conversation, and I can get to that a little bit later. The language of your particular database might be different, but I'll tell you what, a spreadsheet in Excel, a different spreadsheet in Google Sheets, Sign Up Genius, Wufoo, Constant Contact. Like I tell you what, as soon as you split up your data, guess what you did? Say it with me. You split up your data. And just realize you did that on purpose. Why is it so confusing? Because you chose confusion, right? Like, and so own it, and then fix it. What should we do with our data? I would suggest that you should integrate it. Pull it all into one thing. And there may not be one thing that's perfect, but I'll tell you what's not perfect. Dividing your data. And so if you're on a ship, or if you're on a database and you don't necessarily like it, switch. Stop apologizing for it and making excuses. People say, well, it costs more. I was like, yeah, but if you're paying for something that doesn't work, that, my friends, is a waste of money. Like if you bought a car and it sat in your driveway leaking oil, that's not smart. That's a waste of money, right? You're still making payments on the thing that's not working.
Well, what do they complain about? We start fixing things. What are they complain about?
Right. Yeah. Oh, I want to say something real quick about quality and quantity of data. Okay, if you've got a little bit, if you've got great data but it's not that much, work on getting more great data by creating more metric points. So start having people do a sign-up sheet if you're not going to use a database, and then enter it into something, but then have a way to review it. And if you don't, then create one. Guys, it's binary. It's yes or no. If you have a little bit of great data, get more of it. If you've got a lot of bad data, make it better. And how do you do that? You give people opportunities to give you more. Like I think that's why I like data stuff so much, because there's so much of life that is confusing. But with data, it's yes or no. It is or it isn't. You did or you didn't. You have or you haven't. Right? Go.
To his question about how do you get people to check in, you want that quality of data. You make it easy and you make it consistent, right?
Yeah.
So at 9 o'clock service, at 9:15, Pastor stops and says, everybody pull out their phones. And we're all going to check in, right?
That might work.
Now you're doing it. If you don't actually want that data, if you're not actually going to use that data, don't do it. And if the district wants numbers, 20. Right? I mean, put the effort in for the data that you want to take out of it and use that data.
That's funny. I had a note about why we collect data, and it might be for LCMS reporting. Why would we do hyperboles? Because our friends are at the Mega Church Conference, and we want to go too. You've got to create systems for that. But I'm going to say it again. If you create one system, not everybody's going to use it. But if you create several systems that talk to each other, then you collect more data points, and eventually you'll get more good data. What now? Gosh, we've kind of been talking about that. Here's one. Okay, determine the path. What does that mean? So if I'm a first-time guest, I'm going to use these fun little dots here. I'm a first-time guest, and I told you so. What do you want me to do next?
Let us know you're here.
Okay. Now what? What are you going to do in response to that?
Thanks for stopping by our church.
Yeah, you can use that app that lets you do a personal one, even if it's not that many, right? Yeah. So follow up, say thank you. Now what are you going to do?
Thank you next weekend.
Okay. And now what?
Ask if you were here.
Huh?
Ask if you were here.
Yeah. We noticed you were here last week because you told it. No, because you told us so. I think this is where I was standing, right? And we invited you to come back. And now maybe you did, but you didn't check in. But you can say, hey, I didn't get a chance to see you last week. Were you able to make it? They may or may not respond, but they'll notice that you noticed. Even if you didn't necessarily notice, but your data told you to at least inquire. Okay? What would come next? How many times do you pester somebody? You have to decide.
Another break after that.
Yeah. If you pester them 3 times and they still don't come back, do you keep pestering them? You decide. Is it working or is it not working? Okay. So I would say determine a path for something like first-time attenders. Determine a path for first-time givers. If you gave for the first time and it was spontaneous, how would you do this? Spontaneous envelope? Probably not. Cash? You might not do that. But maybe you write a check. Now you enter their name into the system for the first time because they gave it to you. Maybe you invite them after you see 3 of those because you're tracking how many times somebody gives, even if it's 6 weeks apart. Hey, I noticed that you've been faithful in contributing to the mission and vision of our church and giving thanks to God by giving Him a portion of what He's given to you. And maybe you even tell stories about what we're doing with the money that you're entrusting us with, right? Have you considered automatic giving? No? Okay. Let me tell you about some of the advantages of it. It's a way for you to commit to the mission and vision of this church. So determine the path. What else? There might be, okay, so first-time giving, first-time attending, discipleship path. You know, you go from Sunday school, and when you hit a certain grade, what do we as Lutherans encourage you to do? Confirmation, yeah? What do we encourage you to do after that? Huh?
Stay connected through senior youth.
Okay, stay connected through senior youth. And so you can measure whether or not they are, right? So this determine the path. If you haven't determined the path, then how are you going to know if you're on it? Okay? And then my next thing here, and this is less data, but just more strategy. If you determine the path and you're measuring points along the way through various methods, and it might be your mom who keeps giving, even though I'm not sure if you're coming to Sunday school, okay, then I would encourage you to staff the path. Because if someone's saying, we noticed you were here, thank you for letting us know, I invite you to come back, but who's got the ball? Who's going to do that one? Well, someone will. Or maybe not. Black and white. Okay? So staff the path. Determine your path, staff it, and then work the process over and over and over again. Go ye therefore and always be closing. Because you've said, we want you to do this, and then we want you to do this, and then we want you to do this, and that's what I mean by always be closing. Always be working on moving people down the path that you've determined they should be on, and that you've decided to put investment of time of your staff or equipping volunteers to do that thing. And if you don't want to, just realize that you decided not to staff the path that you determined people should be on. And then you're going to wonder why you may or may not be getting the results you're getting, and it might be as simple as you determined it, but you're not working it. Or you worked it once and it was great. Okay? So in Planning Center, this is called workflows. In CCB, it's called a process queue. I don't know what it is in others. This is from my church in Milwaukee, and step 1 freaked me out. I'm not going to lie. If you were a first-time guest, somebody dropped off banana bread that afternoon at your place. And I like the spoon at my house when I'm baking. There's no way I'm eating your banana bread. I don't even know who you are. And who you kissed in 8th grade. You know, like, I'm not going there. So at my church, on purpose, we, in my opinion, accidentally distracted. We chose on purpose to give people a home visit and bake goods. That day there was one person who had let us know that they were here, and so, what was her name? There was someone who was responsible for step 1, because we staffed the path. And when they did that, they hit complete, and it moved to the next path, which then flagged the next person on Monday morning to give an initial welcome call or email. If they gave a phone number, you might call them or text them, a little less pushy. And after you did that, you would hit complete step, and it goes down to the next person. And it was based on this initial conversation. If they got a response, they might say, hey, they mentioned that they really enjoyed the music and that they played guitar in high school. And so you assign a follow-up call, perhaps to your worship person, and they might connect on an affinity, on a common ground, so that the conversations are relevant. So they assign it, the people have to make it. During that call, you might invite them to a discipleship intro class or pizza with the pastor, or whatever you call that next step. They do or they don't show up. And if they do, then they continue back into the first sort of, hey, now that you show up and you think you want to be part of this place, what sort of things do you want to do to contribute and be part of this and get to know people? We will work with each other. We will work side by side. Invite people into that stuff. Sidebar. Gosh, what's that phrase? They don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. But in the meantime, we have church next Sunday. And remember that song, we will work with each other, we will work side by side, and they'll know we are Christians by love. So while we keep doing our jobs, let's get to know people. Don't wait to get to know people to do your job. When people ask me, I had a friend, when I moved to Milwaukee, I had a friend of mine say, hey, I'm moving to a church. What advice would you give to me? I know you just moved. And I said, guns blazing. Like, if you know what to do, go in and do it. Do it kindly. But why would you wait 6 months to EQ the kick drum? Well, I want to make sure the drummer knows that I love him. The drummer will love you because you fixed the kick drum. He shows up and practices it. You know what I mean? Like take action and move along. So at my previous church, we chose a path. We staffed the path. Now here's, as an executive director, let's say, or a senior pastor at your place, when you know that this is assigned to, I'm not going to say his real name, let's say Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. I mean, he seems capable, but if he doesn't do his job, because there's 50 people still in his queue, when I train people in these tools, I say, if you do your job, you're going to love it. If you don't do your job, you're going to hate it. And now that's a different conversation that your senior pastor has to have. And here's the thing. If you lie about it, because you don't want someone to talk to you about it, man, now you're in all sorts of trouble. Because the next person is going to say, hey, I heard that you talked to Dwayne Johnson. And it's like, he never called me. And you're like, that's funny, because he said you completed the step. Right? So staff the path, work the path, and then when they're done, it's completed. And what do you do next? Start over. No, you start over because someone new, hopefully, is coming into the top. And now I'll say this. You can create a list. How many people have entered this workflow in the last 42 days? I keep picking 6 weeks because Barna said that's, some sort of habit. And if it's been 42 days and no one entered your path, maybe what you're doing isn't working, or maybe it's working but people won't talk about it. you got to decide. But if you have facts to look at, then you can make decisions on what you're going to do, because you're saying what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confusing. What's missing? Guests. I don't know.
Do you have other workflows we can steal?
I do. So remember, I said I work at a church that isn't using this particular thing. My church is currently using CCB, and I get false process cues all the time because someone's manually entering them and they hit complete without checking who it was assigned to, because it's not automated. But a first-time guest should be able to, in Planning Center it does, automatically get entered into a workflow and a process queue, and you get a notification so you can walk in on Monday morning, and here's the here's the daily part. You can walk into your job on Monday morning, open your Chrome tabs, and one tab might be your guest workflow, and you look to see if anyone's on your list, and if so, you either do it or you don't. And then if you don't, then maybe you should start or lose your job, because somebody else might want to do it instead. And you either choose to be effective in it or you choose not to be. Y'all, I just think it really comes down to accountability. The stuff is the way it is because you've chosen to let it be that way. And it may sound like I'm kicking you in the face, but what I'm trying to do is encourage us to get to work, because Jesus will come back someday, and there may or may not be more people in heaven with us. So here's a process queue that I created. So at my church, we have a budget to add musicians to our bands. We're multi-site, so we've got 1, 2, 3 Sunday morning bands that we use, or organ. And if someone's not available to fill a spot, we either decide to fill it or we decide not to. And so at my church, we've chosen to decide to, because like if your pastor's not there, someone's got to do something, right? I mean, do you cancel church? When you're a pipe organ player, one person can play the entire band. If you don't want a bass player, you amputate the left leg of the lady, right? Because she does it with her feet. But when you're in a band, you need a bass player if you're going to do it right. Okay? So we have money to hire people occasionally, and we've got a good list of people who enjoy being there. And there was one time, poor Amanda, viola player, I accidentally somehow went a whole year without paying her. And she kept saying yes because she trusted me, and she said, I know where you work. But I was like, oh my gosh, like I am so sorry. So I created a process queue that in Planning Center Services, I made a tag where you're a staff member, a contract paid member, or a volunteer. If you're paid and you served in the last 7 days, go into a workflow, and I show up on Monday morning now and Amanda got paid. She had $1,100 that time because it had been a year. Easter, Christmas, big ones, and a few little ones in the way. And now I don't miss payments anymore, because if you said yes, and you're classified as a paid person, organist, my email goes out Monday morning automatically. Hey, thanks for serving this past weekend. I want to remind you our processes include an invoice, because I need to prove why I'm getting money at my church for somebody, and so send me an invoice. Invoice received, check request written, check sent, complete. Repeat cycle again, so Amanda gets paid. That's an example of a process queue as a worship leader that I use within Planning Center, even though my church uses CCB, because I want to do my job, and I want to do it well. Yeah?
I do just want to say, just to highlight, a lot of that Planning Center will send automatically. And you could have some standard emails from the pastor thanking them for coming. So a lot of that, don't be overwhelmed, like, well, we don't have 12 people. A lot of it could just be the automatic reach outs.
You can create templates that allow you to do a little customizing. So I would say if you spoke,
like, you need both. I'm just saying,
absolutely.
If someone's looking at it for the first time, it's not as unachievable as it may look.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, that's very true. I want to see what I have next. Data-driven, process-driven, team-driven. You don't have to do this all yourself, because the pastor didn't bake the bread. He didn't lick the spoon. It was some other lady that did. But she was equipped to do her part of it because she believed in the growth of the church and the mission of it. She wanted to help always be closing.
Would, let's say, assign elder, would that automatically move into another workflow for the elder?
No, he's in this. Well, it could.
So when he goes into there, it automatically go into another workflow for him?
Yeah. So yeah, because when you log in on this particular app, you can see which are my cards and which are somebody else's cards. And if you're an administrator, you can see everyone's cards. If you want to do your job, you look at your to-do list. If you want to check up on other people because you're in charge of them, you can do it. Okay. But you could create a list, because data is binary. If step 7 equals John Smith for the assigned elder, add to elder workflow 1, let's say.
Let me put on his calendar, so every 3 months he meets with him. He can go 3 months from there on, he puts on his calendar every 3 months.
Right, and here's how you would do that. And I'll bet other software, other databases do it, and if they don't, and if it's working, great. But if it's not, change it. But what you would do is say, call number 1. Expected response in Planning Center, the way it works is I want you to call them in 3 days. And if you don't, it'll flag you. And then when you hit complete, it goes to the next step, and you snooze that one for 30 days. And so you snooze it, and in 30 days, once it moved to step 2, it says, hey, why don't you give them a follow-up call? Expected response time, 3 days. Because it's been a month now, and we decided that we should call people after a month. Okay? So, and then you can snooze again, and snooze again, and snooze again. Repeatable, sustainable. Should I stop already? Are we doing okay still? I have a little bit more stuff. What time are we supposed to be done? Noon? Wow, I'm amazed that I had too much stuff. Accountable. I love this one. If you're a worship leader and you don't have a band, at some point the pastor will say, how come you didn't have a band again? If you're the worship director and your pastor shows up and preaches a boring sermon again, at some point it's like, hey man, like if you can get away with that, why can't I get away with that, right? If you can get away with leaving 50 people in the invitation to discipleship class, I would say the executive pastor or the senior pastor is not doing his job to hold his team accountable. And then you at least ask the question, hey man, is there something else you should be doing? Workflows help with care, with serving, with small groups, with giving. Thank you for giving. I invite you to give again. Thank you for attending. I invite you to come again. We've noticed you haven't been attending. We'd invite you to come again, but speak to them differently. Don't chastise people for being faithful. Encourage them. I would say, do I have this up here? Oh, here's that grid. Gosh, that was way late. Remember I said the linear thing was difficult for me? Here's that digital, analog, text to give, cash, spontaneous. Did that make sense before? If it didn't, maybe this helps a little bit. I'll leave that up for a second. 1,000. Okay. Targeted communication. One of my favorite things about having good data is you can speak to people where they're at. Okay? And when you do, I would suggest, and I think we get this wrong in most of our churches, when we're making an announcement or an invitation, we do 80% what and very little of why. And if you've ever seen the Simon Sinek Golden Circle TED Talk, you know, you start with the why, and then you go with the what, and then maybe it's just a link in the landing page and not a really long paragraph of some sort. So your communication is 80% why. Now here's the thing. I may invite you to small group ministry. No, I'm going to invite you to the ladies' retreat because you've never gone. And so what's the reason for me to be inviting you for the first time? It'll be different than, hey, we know you came last year. We hope you had a great time. You ought to come back. It'd be great to see you there. And so it's maybe a different reason. Reconnect with people from the last retreat. Or, you know what I mean? So and so I would say this. When you're doing mass emails, we talked about templates just a second ago. If you're doing mass emails, your what is going to be the ladies' retreat. The link will be a registration no matter who you are. So create that bottom paragraph, put snazzy graphics and the right link on it, and have two different lists. The repeat offenders and the people who were absent, and write a different paragraph for each of those and send two different emails. Because I would speak to you differently than I would maybe speak to you. But I should speak to both of you because silent treatment is lame, I think. I hate silent treatment, digital silent treatment. People might ignore your conversations because you're not speaking to them. You're speaking to somebody else. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to tune you out. So I think having good data can lead to targeted communication. What are you currently using? Church membership, mass email? I asked that question a little earlier. I probably forgot to delete this slide. More effective engagement with high quality data These are the Planning Center apps. Oh, this is an example of a filter. I don't know what the lists, what the queries look like a whole lot on other databases. I think these are simple. If your grade is between 5th and 12, or your age is between 10 and 18, because I might not have your grade, but I might have your birthday. So if it's either or, then I want to include you. And if you have been marked as a member, then I want you to show up on my list, because I want to talk to 5th through 12th graders, 10 to 18-year-olds who are members of our church differently than if you're a 5th through 12th grade, 10th through 8th grade who is not a member. So you exclude people who are members, and it pulls up a completely different list. I don't know how it works in others, but when you have information like that, you can speak to people differently. One example, Q&A. So look, I love Planning Center. I think it's very effective. It has all the tools to be integrated. I don't work for Planning Center. Planning Center knows who I am. We're in communication with one another. I'm not licensed by them. But if you're dissatisfied with your database and you want help, you can visit me at planningcenterpro.com. I love spreadsheets, and I'm motivated. And I'll stay up till 2 a.m. and clean up your spreadsheets and then create a place to hold them in a new database. I can show up and train you on site, or I can do it over Zoom. And I can help you navigate questions like what's your path, determine it, and staff it. I just want to be available for that sort of thing. And I'm high energy, I think, and I'm motivated because I have a son who wants to go to flight school, and so I do it for side gigs a little bit. I just wanted you to know that. But either way, regardless of what platform you use, I hope that these binary questions caused you to at least feel like you should go back and rethink how you're using it or not. Any questions? It's 11:53, we have 7 minutes.
What's the best part about confusion?
The best part about confusion? Is there such a thing?
Yeah. John Winger at Concordia St. Paul. When you're confused, you're on the verge of learning something. Because you're processing.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, you will. You will.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. But you're going to...
Recommendations for getting staff engagement in like that to get their engagement for good data.
Okay, depends on who. So if it's your children's ministry director, let's say, or a volunteer who works that, give them tools that are intuitive. Give them resources to do the job. Gosh, there's nothing more frustrating than a leader who has no authority but has a ton of responsibility, right? Like, don't wait for permission for, I don't know. You got to give them resources, you got to give them responsibility, you got to give them authority, and I believe you need accountability. And you may not be the person to ask the hard questions like, hey, Dwayne Johnson, why aren't you doing your job? Well, because I'm scared of you. Like, okay, I don't know. And then, so I think it's picking one that makes sense and then holding people accountable to it. At my previous church in Milwaukee, we would bring our iPads or our computers, and we would look at the data we got from that weekend, and we would talk about people. Hey, did you get a chance to talk to this person? How did we know they were new? Because their profile was created in the last 2 days, let's say. And so they appear automatically if you create a queue or a list to do so. And in Planning Center, it's pretty easy. Again, I don't know what it is in others, but your database should be able to do that in a process queue or a list or a query. But you got to hold people accountable to it, just like you would on anything, I think.
Does CCB do a lot of the data pulls and breakdown that you have demonstrated in this, or is that more just for process?
To be honest with you, I don't even know, because this is terrible. I'll admit it. I'm going to pause, actually.
Oh, no.
I'm back.
How does the data turn personal? I mean, because the data says certain things, but people change their mind next week.
Yeah.
And then somebody got emotional for, what you're doing at church, and then some people did it that way. They didn't look at the data.
Do as I say, not as I do. Don't. Yeah. Y'all, look. If Like at some point you have to face the music of that thing. Like eventually someone's going to say, "Why do you keep using that?" Because it's better, and you're so emotional. You won't let me show you. I don't know, whatever. Sorry, that's not a good.
Import the data, set it up, and show them that it works.
Believe me, I have absolutely thought about that.
It's kind of like the service change earlier, where you have to recognize as a leader you need buy-in, and when you make the change, you have to be able to point to why. And if you don't have the initial buy-in with your leadership, you're going to sabotage yourself trying to make that change.
And in my case, y'all, I've had bigger fish to fry. I didn't think our music was all that good. We needed a whole bunch of different tools, and so as much as I love data, I had bigger fish to fry in that case. Yeah, man.
A little more focus. I know you're not trying to focus on Planning Center, but on those workflows, have you wrestled with automation versus direct contact? And does workflows does it integrate with the automated responses and stuff like that?
Automated responses from the people, or an automated email you send out?
If we do it within Planning Center. If your first contact is a automated email, does it track that?
You can tell. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think if you can tell that somebody read it. I believe so. I know in Planning Center there's an activity log of all communication that is sent or received from a person. In the workflows, you can keep notes that pertain only to the workflow, or you can add notes to their profiles, because it might be I had a conversation with so-and-so and their mom died of cancer, and we should follow up in a year with that person. So you can create stuff like that for sure.